Angus, LiDAR is used on various applications, warehouses, security, robots, self driving cars, autonomous trucks. What is the current state of the LiDAR market?
LiDAR is actually increasingly important in all manner of autonomy. I think that the thing that's changed in the last 4 years, since a lot of LiDAR companies went public via SPACs, including Ouster, is that LiDAR has emerged as a key sensor for autonomy in general and not just autonomy for cars. And a lot of this has been on the back of kind of AI and NVIDIA speaking publicly about autonomy for all moving things. But actually, if you look back, this was Ouster's thesis all along. When I co-founded Ouster in 2015, our original pitch deck said Ouster was going to build autonomy for everything because autonomy is a global trend that is bigger than just autonomous vehicles. And so for me, the LiDAR industry is now adopting language and realizing this much bigger opportunity that Ouster saw coming. And it's why Ouster has emerged in the last, since going public, has emerged as the largest Western provider of this technology. Because we saw this coming and we built products and we built a go-to-market that could serve not just autonomy for cars, but autonomy for all moving machines. But one thing that hasn't changed is there's still a lot of LiDAR companies. There's still a lot of public LiDAR companies. And there's still a fair amount of noise and debate around which LiDAR companies will prevail. And also, is LiDAR even needed for all of these applications? And, we were talking before the show started about just this ongoing debate is almost helpful for companies like us because it keeps LiDAR in the news. A debate on LiDAR versus cameras and where does LiDAR go in the long term? I like that because it keeps LiDAR in the news.
Everything that moves will become autonomous. You said in 2015, when you're out there in your pitch deck, autonomy for everything. You've been proven right. I've said very publicly for years, autonomy becomes an economy called the autonomy economy. But in 2015, individuals weren't talking about that. How were investors receiving the autonomy for everything message back in 2015?
I will say it fell on deaf ears because, there's trends in technologies, there's trends in Silicon Valley. In 2015, 2016, if you recall, autonomous vehicles were the biggest thing in the world. It was the AI of today. And there were billion-dollar exits happening seemingly every other week. Cruise was getting acquired by GM for $1 billion+. And every ambitious engineer in the Valley was seemingly going into robotaxis and autonomy for cars. So to kind of push that aside and say, no, this is actually bigger than that, and it's going to apply to all this other stuff too, was not, that's not what investors wanted to hear. So I will say raising money at that time with that pitch, while it was right, and I mean, it was right, but it doesn't mean that investors resonated. So it was an uphill battle for Ouster at the beginning. And even after the first round, 2017, 2018, still autonomous vehicles was the only thing anyone wanted to hear about. And it took about 7 to 8 years for that to shift. And for the whole for some of the luster in autonomous vehicles to wane, for this new trend to emerge, and for people to start listening to the thing that now I've been saying for almost going on a decade. I feel like a broken record, but sometimes that's what it takes. Consistency, believing in a strategy, and hopefully you're right. But it's better to believe, not pivot, and be one of the ones that's right ultimately. And that's what I think Ouster is.
Do you feel that the only AVs was investors trying to ride a hype cycle? And I say that, and going back in the Wayback Machine, I remember when Danny Shapiro was the GM of NVIDIA's automotive business. That gentleman couldn't get a meeting under the sun. And now all suddenly it's like, whoa, NVIDIA's here. It just seemed that everybody's just trying to surf this trend. Did you see that same thing where everybody's wanting to follow this trend?
Yeah, I mean, for sure. Like, it's human nature to follow a trend. When everyone else is saying something, more often than not, the group is correct, right? It's a good pattern matching. And investors in Silicon Valley make a lot of money doing that. You can invest in, and they did on the early exits in autonomy back in 2015, 16, 17. Investors made a ton of money on a number of those companies. all the way through to a bunch of them de-SPACing. And the early investors also made money there. So from that perspective, it worked for them. But when you actually look at the long-term viability and like what was the right strategy, just because an investor makes money doesn't mean that that's the right strategy for the technology and a business long-term. They're two different things. So yeah, I think there's bandwagon investing for sure, but it's not necessarily irrational investing for that point in time and that set of investors.
If you look at that coming out of that, there was the LiDAR craze. Investors wanted LiDAR, 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 and we've seen a lot of collapsing in that market. You have the healthiest balance sheet of any publicly traded LiDAR company out there. From a technology standpoint, what separates Ouster's LiDAR technology from your competitors?
Yeah, so Ouster is special for probably three reasons. The first is just our invention of digital LiDAR, the core technology that we built the entire company on, which is digital LiDAR, this concept of building a custom semiconductor ASIC that absorbs as much of the complexity and cost of a LiDAR onto a single silicon chip. And then riding Moore's law of increasing capability and complexity packed into those chips year after year after year. And Ouster is now on, we have our third generation architecture, seventh revision of our products are out in the market. So we've done a lot of silicon tape outs and advanced the technology just through that Moore's law-esque, riding the wave that Silicon Valley has ridden for the last 70 years. The second is just diversification. We were able to diversify using that digital LiDAR technology into many markets. And that's the whole, strategy of autonomy for everything. But it takes just saying autonomy for everything and building a product line that applies to everything. That's a much harder and higher bar. And the digital LiDAR technology, the form factor, the cost, the capability of the new technology allowed us to do that, build an expansive product line. And then the last thing is just the software solutions that we brought to play. So Ouster is unique among LiDAR players that we've built a robust set of software solutions in the smart infrastructure domain. So we have our Blue City product for traffic control, and we have Gemini for other smart and fixed infrastructure, namely security technology and logistics automation. So those three things combined have led to Ouster's commercial success, I would say. But it all comes back to the technology at the end of the day.
When you were initially developing the technology, was there always a focus on digital LiDAR with a really great software layer?
Yeah, it was always, every boardroom in Silicon Valley that is built, for a company built around hardware discusses how you're going to move into software. You show me a hardware company, I'll show you, a behind the scenes discussion of the long-term software play. But it's one thing to talk about it; it's another thing to make it successful. And Ouster's software play is far from where the success that I want it to be. We've seen really good traction in the last 2 years since we brought it out, but the opportunity for selling software solutions into our verticals far outweighs the opportunity to sell LiDAR. If you just think about the amount of money, time, resources that our customers spend integrating our LiDAR with software, an autonomous vehicle company, their software team, much more money is spent there than on the hardware itself. So that just kind of indicates the size of these different markets. So yeah, much different to go after the software layer versus actually achieve scale and success as a business with the software layer, when all of our DNA from the very beginning, originated in hardware technology. But I'm determined to do it, and Ouster's on a good path.
You're adding on a layer, that software layer. What do you see it powering in the future? Is that going to power warehouses of the future? Is it going to power robotics of the future? What do you see that software layer powering in the future?
You can step along the problem. There's many different layers to autonomy, from perception to planning to the kind of the user space or business logic that rides above it. Autonomy for a forklift has some shared components with autonomy for a car, and it has some shared components with the perception system that we're bolting to a traffic intersection. So you can step the problem along and find the common parts and then move up the stack. Now we've gone all the way with Blue City to kind of learn what it takes to build a full solution. where you require, we sell off the shelf traffic control technology with no engineering or integration required. And that's what Blue City is. Changes the lights using just our product, just our hardware. But there are components of that we can start to kind of commercialize for mobile autonomy, industrial autonomy, automotive autonomy. But eventually, I see Ouster supplying autonomy solutions full stack to the majority of our customers. And hopefully, people will start to think of Ouster as an autonomy company and not a LiDAR company. That's kind of ultimately where this is going. Autonomy solutions for multiple markets. Ouster is kind of this new breed of full stack autonomy integrator.
What are you doing to change that narrative in the marketplace and saying, hey, Ouster's just not a LiDAR company, we're an autonomy company?
Well, I mean, one is just messaging around selling software solutions. There's a lot of repetition here. And we've been talking about our software solutions for years now. We've been talking about becoming an autonomy integrator for years. But it for people to really pay attention, I think usually requires evidence of success, overwhelming evidence that you've already become that company. You look at NVIDIA, and Jensen Huang has been talking about the same things for decades. And NVIDIA's stock wallowed for kind of the middle part of the early aughts. And he was saying the same thing. He was working on CUDA for a decade before anyone really paid attention. Technical people paid attention. Technical people knew that GPUs were amazing for all these tasks, but the market didn't. And now looking back, it's like, oh, wow, they were there 10 years ago. They were already the world leader in, parallel computing, high performance computing, and AI. And he looks like a genius in hindsight because he was. So, but he was going blue in the face saying the same thing for a couple decades now. So yeah, there's a little bit of, you have to prove to the market that you're already there. And then have the track record to show that actually you were there for a while.
One of Jensen's greatest gifts was lightning fast and being able to shift on a dime and stick to it. Oh, you need to pay a dividend. You need to do share repurchases. And he would blur out all the noise and focus on building a great product. And look where they are today because of his ability to remove all the noise and focus on building a company. Look at building. You recently announced Chattanooga, Tennessee. And I learned this. That's where the home of freight waves, and Dooner's actually moving the world's largest miniature train collection to Chattanooga, Tennessee today, which is really cool. Of coincidence. Why Chattanooga, and what are the Blue City going to unlock for the city of Chattanooga with your LiDAR deployment intersection?
Yeah, so Chattanooga, this is an amazing opportunity for us because we've been working on Blue City at Ouster since merging with Velodyne 2 years ago. But Blue City has existed for many years before that. And the founders are still at Ouster. So Assad and Ian, great founders, passionate about this product. And they want to see it through in the same way that I want to see, Ouster through. And I'm still loving what I'm doing. They're still loving what they're doing, building Blue City. But Chattanooga is, I think, the first proof point that we have crossed the Rubicon into something that is truly, it's done, it's ready, and it can be deployed at city scale. And for a couple of reasons. So Chattanooga has always been kind of a forward-thinking city. They are the first city to adopt Google Fiber. They have 10 gigabit Ethernet internet everywhere in the city, which is like way beyond where most cities are even still today. So they've have this kind of track record of investing in city infrastructure and municipal infrastructure. So they've been working with Blue City behind the scenes on pilot projects for quite a while and have built up a big body of evidence about how effective it is in a couple things. The first is just city planning. So collecting analytics. And this is where Blue City started. It was not actually about traffic actuation. It was about measuring what the heck is going on with your road users. Really good example of this is they had a problem with jaywalking along Martin Luther King Boulevard, where there's the university is on one side of the street and there's a bunch of convenience stores and late night eateries on the other and no crosswalks. And so they put Blue City up along this corridor and measured how bad the jaywalking was. And you can get these heat maps of students late at night just going everywhere across the street. But they could also, the heat maps that Blue City create showed where the highest density of students was. And there is a clear place where they were mostly crossing. And so they said, let's put a crosswalk right there where most of the students already naturally jaywalk. And they did that. And overnight, it's like you can see the heat map before and after. And it's like all the students are now using the crosswalk. There was no jaywalking, dropped it by like 95% or something. And importantly, it also dropped the near miss collisions that are happening. So Blue City measures kind of these interactions between road users. And it reduced that as well. It showed that cars and pedestrians were coming in. There were fewer instances of these kind of close contact scenarios. So it changed a problem from being like amorphous to completely solvable and data driven for the city. So they've been doing that a lot. But the other thing is just changing the lights more effectively, more efficiently. And anyone that's been stuck at a traffic light at 2 a.m. with a red turn left signal and not a soul around knows what I'm talking about. Changing the lights more efficiently is all about detecting road users and then and knowing the state of the entire intersection so that you can give people that are queued up the green. And it's not just cars, it's bicyclists and pedestrians too. So it makes things safer, more efficient, and allows city planners to actually have data-driven decisions.
What has to be done from an installation perspective? Do you have to run fiber up there? Do you have to run power? What type of hardware outside of the LiDAR do you have to put in these intersections to gather that data?
Yeah, the good thing is it's easier than any other traffic control technology for automating an entire intersection. So traditionally, you have inductive loops that you dig into the ground for each lane, and that requires permitting, a construction crew, you name it. It's expensive, it's time consuming. LiDAR, you put 2 LiDAR sensors catty-cornered on opposite corners of an intersection, and then an edge computer, which is, it's a NVIDIA GPU edge server in the cabinet or bolted to a pole, and that runs your intersection. Blue City is designed to be edge enabled only, so you don't need it to have a network connection, which is important because you need the lights to change even when there's network outages. So in its simplest case, you just install 2 LiDARs on brackets and this edge computer, and then you wire the edge computer into the signal controller. So the installation it takes a matter of hours and is fundamentally lower cost than alternatives, inductive loops being kind of one of the most challenging. But even traffic cameras, kind of machine learning, traffic camera based or radar based systems, you have to install 4 to 8 traffic cameras to get the coverage of 2 LiDARs. And so the costs kind of scale with the number of unique objects that you need to permit for and get a person up on a bucket truck for. So LiDAR is more capable and cheaper to get deployed.
I served in a city role years ago, and full disclosure, I've had a long relationship with Blue City going back, and I've been able to experience their tech firsthand, and it was very impressive. In the city role, the number one driver for us of looking at Blue City versus a camera-based solution, privacy issues. Is that still this was 8 years ago. Is that still a driver today? We're using LiDAR because of the privacy that LiDAR provides versus a camera?
Yes, I'm glad you mentioned this because this is huge. And it's something I really care about personally. I don't see any reason why my traffic light needs to have the capability to run facial detection. And I know, you can responsibly make a camera system that doesn't detect a face, that just doesn't turn on any kind of AI face detection. But the fact is, you don't even have to worry about that with LiDAR. LiDAR cannot do that. LiDAR cannot read a license plate. And in most cities, the law enforcement, which may have license plate readers and may have facial detection systems, is completely separate from the traffic DOT. And so they don't want to have any overlap in those systems. And so you want pure privacy preserving systems for your traffic control. And it's a huge selling point. And a lot of times the budgets for these things are voted on by the citizens in one way or another, or the citizens have a veto vote. If they caught wind of the fact that there was a bunch of facial recognition systems going in for controlling the lights or facial recognition capable systems, they'll vote it out. they'll strip it out of, and this happened notably years ago in San Diego. Big project went in for smart traffic lights, actually smart street lights. And the citizens, I think it was a $30 million project, $30 million. And the citizens of San Diego said, no way, voted out. They ripped it all out. So privacy is important. I get it. And that's definitely one of the values for Blue City.
Does that become a growth driver, privacy, for your Blue City division? Because what you described in San Diego is happening in municipalities and cities all across the country. Let's be honest, and I'll be very frank. A lot of municipalities do not want to become London. They're spooked of what could be done with that data.
Blue City is such a no-brainer on so many levels. Like, you have to change the lights. Like, there's no, like, every city has to change the lights. So it's a matter of just choosing the best system to do that. And the best system is, it's a spider graph of privacy, capability, cost, convenience. And Blue City on all those metrics is best in class. And so, yes, privacy is obviously one of the selling points, but the fact is it's a better product in every one of those metrics. And that's why, I'm expecting and seeing very rapid adoption of the technology. So I think 2025 is going to be an immense year for Blue City. Now that we have this proof point of a major municipality putting in literally, 100 intersections plus, that's all of downtown Chattanooga is being automated with this product. And that's a real, line in the sand, kind of communicating that this system is ready for the prime time.
It's ready for the prime time. The jaywalk example, I mean, that's a clear-cut example. If you fix a problem, you potentially saved a lot of lives. And if you didn't save lives, you made it safer, but you detected people. So you have the Gemini product, which I don't know, I'm curious if it was spun out of Blue City, but that's focused on security. Can you put that at areas that are of high security now, data centers, warehouses, yards? Can you use that for security apparatus as well?
Yeah. So Gemini is Blue City. It's this idea of putting fixed LiDARs on poles, at doorways, on fence lines to monitor other infrastructure, mainly for security and for logistics, kind of for facility automation and asset tracking. So same technology stack, same hardware even, but multimodal, a lot of customization because, maybe we're installing it to monitor the fence line of a data center in a very remote part of the world or a remote part of the US in one case, whereas we're putting it in a logistics hub to monitor, forklifts and tractor trailers and people walking around a huge distribution center in another. So there's a lot of customization possible with the Gemini product, but ultimately the technology stack that kind of underpins both is the same. But yeah, it's a big industry. Security, huge, tens of billions of dollars spent each year on physical security. And what Gemini is doing is bringing a guarantee into the security world for, it's bringing automation and it's bringing a guarantee to these operators. So for the very first time, talk about the data center example, we can guarantee basically that we will detect someone loitering outside a fence line, attempting to hop a fence line, and a camera system can't give that guarantee. Cameras today, the state of the art is still you pay, multiple people to 24/7 monitor a huge wall of security cameras. That's what you do, and you have them try to detect issues, intruders and people loitering or hopping a fence. So it's relying on a human to be the kind of first line of like analysis. Gemini flips that around. Gemini is able to automatically detect and queue up and alert a security operator. So instead of the guard kind of having to monitor that wall, the guard gets a push notification saying there is someone at this 3D location in your facility. And hey, by the way, here's a live 3D view of them and where they're going. So super powerful technology. And we're seeing, from the early adopters of this, a clear ROI in how they, how they think about security staffing or logistics staffing, and also just the efficiency that they can pull out of, from using these technologies.
Are we seeing LiDAR used from a national security perspective in terms of securing deploying on borders?
We've seen a little border work. So I mean, it's a natural. Yeah, the border is in the national zeitgeist right now. And the problem with borders is they're very remote and they're very, very long. So the cost of building a secure border that's thousands and thousands of miles long with no electricity and no network connections for large swaths of it make it difficult for Gemini to be the right product, because the expense, our LiDARs, Gemini has very good range for a security product. You can see people out hundreds of meters, whereas most security cameras can only detect within, under 100 meters away. But ultimately, that's 100-meter spacing of LiDARs for thousands of miles is a big expense. And how do you run power and connectivity to all of them? So, but things like checkpoints, it's a natural use case. Tolling and checkpoints, when you want to do things like analyze vehicle axle counts for accurate tolling or for some sort of automated analysis, maybe you have a risk of smuggling or something like that. Being able to say, this is the type of vehicle that could smuggle goods because it's a big vehicle. I mean, that's a very, very simple thing to do. But the alternative is that you have some human manually saying that vehicle goes there because it's a big truck. That vehicle goes there because it's a small truck. Having an automated system do that extremely reliably at a checkpoint is something that Gemini brings to the table. And then keep in mind, all these systems have to run day or night, rain or shine, snow, sleet, fog. So a camera system may be able to do that 99% of the time. A human may be able to do that 99% of the time. Gemini can do that 99.999% of the time. That's where we're going with this technology. And that's what it takes to automate a system like a checkpoint or a tolling system.
When you automate it, you increase efficiency. That's where all this is going. Everything's going to have to be efficient and scalable. So you clearly it's articulated that the LiDAR increases safety and it increases security. What does it enable for robotics? Because we're seeing this large growth of automating warehouses now. What is LiDAR enabling for that specific sector of robotics?
So at its core, LiDAR is used for mobile autonomy because it's safe. It brings safety to these powerful autonomous machines. And now safety in this context means a guarantee that the machine won't hit something, whether it's a human or a shelf or a pet. And so cameras, LiDAR, radar, they can all give, they're the eyes of these machines. Each one of them independently can be used to navigate a robot around a warehouse or around a hospital or around your house, eventually in the world where a humanoid is doing your dishes at some point. But LiDAR is unique in that it's so good, it's so reliable at measuring things in the environment without edge cases. Again, in all weather conditions or when there's dust in a warehouse. It's so good at that you can make it a safe system, a certified safe system, where kind of it guarantees that it will never hit that human, that pet, or that shelf unit. And cameras today are not capable of the kind of safety requirement that guarantee that they never have a confused perception output or something like that. So ultimately, any robotic platform that's big enough to cause harm to a human has adopted LiDAR in some form or is adopting LiDAR in some form because of that guarantee. Because I've been at a lot of customer sites at this point, and when you see a 6,000-pound forklift that has 6,000 pounds of material autonomously moving around a space that you're standing in physically, and forklifts move quickly. They're powerful. They're big electric drives, lots of torque. They're moving fast in a confined space, and there might be hundreds or thousands of these forklifts in a facility. It can be pretty scary at first to see an autonomous machine that you don't really know. You can't see what it's thinking, and so there's a lot of potential for mistakes or harm if these systems aren't fundamentally and reliably safe. So LiDAR is really important. Once okay, well, These all have safety certified LiDAR on them, and they have basically superhuman vision that cannot be tricked. That's kind of what it takes to be comfortable around these machines.
Safety certified LiDAR. Is that a certification or what is that?
Yeah, there's actually safety certifications for LiDAR today. And people don't know this, but there's a huge market for safety certified industrial LiDAR for industrial robotics. It's not the kind of robotics that you and I think of, like these advanced AI powered systems, but a manufacturing robot, a flat pallet machine that brings car parts to an assembly line. That kind of technology has existed for 2 to 3 decades. And all of it uses safety certified technology, including, the main sensor they use for navigation and collision detection is safety certified LiDAR. And so, like there's safety certifications, ASIL B, ASIL A through D certifications in automotive for safety equipment, including LiDAR, there's also safety certifications for LiDAR being used in the industrial space. And there's many, many products, low performing, simple LiDARs that are super reliable and have these safety certifications for all these legacy use cases. And that's something that Ouster is moving into. It's a great opportunity for us to move into these safety certified robotics and industrial use cases, but with fundamentally new and more capable versions of the LiDAR.
Is there a certification board that does that, or is there a standard that Ouster builds their LiDAR against to achieve that?
Yeah, it's all standards based. This is an interesting thing. People think that a safety certification is like there's some governing body that has laws that have been passed that say this is safe and this is not. But it's actually not like that at all. The US auto industry self-certifies their products to these ISO, these international safety standards. And commonly, like an automaker may have an internal audit function that audits and self-certifies. And over the last century, they've built up this reputation of building safe, good practices, ISO standard adherence, and the ability to self-certify. Tesla came in and decided on their own version of safety standards. That's how autopilot can be produced. It does not adhere necessarily to an ASIL B standard as we know it for the whole autopilot system. And that's because there's no law saying they had to. It's actually all just kind of up to the individual automakers. Same thing with Waymo. They have their own set of safety standards because they're pushing so far beyond where the standards are. They had to come up with their own set of criteria. And, it makes business sense to do the right thing and to build to a high level of safety for any company like this. Because the alternative is you make a mistake, you hurt or kill someone, and then you're out of business. So there's good incentives for people to be doing this the right way, despite the fact that it's not a law. And so the same thing applies for Ouster. Now, in Ouster's case, we're a small company. We don't have a track record of producing safety critical components. And so there are outside firms that will come in and certify your product for you. They review your information and they ultimately, it's a long, arduous process, but they'll give you a cert so that you can take that to your customer and say, this outside firm that's been operating for 100 years and has credibility agrees that this is a safety certified product. And so that's what Ouster does, and a lot of companies do that.
Without that certification, could you sell LiDAR into the industrial robotics space?
What we do today, we have plenty of non-certified products, and there's a use for non-certified LiDAR. But what's interesting is most of the robots that you can do one of two things if you're an Ouster customer. Either you take our non-safety certified LiDAR and you certify the system. So you go through that whole safety certification process using unsafe components or non-certified components. Or you just buy some certified LiDAR and tack them on as the last line of defense failsafe. And that's actually what most customers do. So they're actually paying double for their kind of perception stack. They're buying two sets of LiDAR, the Ouster version that allows you to have a very flexible and capable autonomous machine, and then a last line of defense safety LiDAR that panic stops the robots if something ever goes wrong. Now, what Ouster is moving into is building safety certifications into all of our capable products so that you don't have to do this kind of double purchase. You can rip all that old stuff off and just rely fundamentally on Ouster's products. So clearly a big opportunity for Ouster. It's one of the reasons I'm so bullish about, our prospects in these verticals, is because there's a huge uncaptured value in these safety certified systems for Ouster.
I'll take that a step further with you. I think the industrial robotics space is completely untapped from a market opportunity. If you look at data coming out of California around minimum wage, they're going to automation. We had a report in the Wall Street Journal this week. Apple orchards are all going automation. We had Deere made a very public statement. Mr. May, their CEO, came out on the earnings call and just said, we need automation. Do you see from an industrial robotics standpoint where every industrial robotic in the future, or let's say 90+%, will have LiDAR because what it can unlock from a safety perspective and also from a redundancy perspective?
Yeah, so you're right. We were talking about this at CES with some of the investors we were walking around with. Ouster, we're not even in the early innings. We're in the dugout stretching before the game. Like, that's how early all of this adoption is. So there's going to be an explosion in autonomous platforms. Every last company on earth that makes a machine shopping cart sized and above has an autonomy strategy. And less than 1% of those companies have probably deployed a product with that autonomy technology. And certainly less than 1% of the vehicles that a major OEM, industrial OEM, a tractor company or something, less than 1% of all the unit sales have any type of autonomy on them. So we're in the dugout stretching. There's huge opportunity ahead of us. I absolutely think LiDAR is going to be a major component of the majority of these systems. Now, will they be a component of humanoid robots or really small form factor stuff? I'm not sure. That's going to be a cost benefit of how affordable we can make LiDAR for these small form factors, because safety for a robot that weighs 40 pounds is very different than safety for a robot or a tractor that weighs 4,000 pounds. One can kill a human, one can't. And so the safety requirements are very different. You actually don't need to have LiDAR to meet a safety certification for a small mobile robot that cleans your floor, for instance. So, but for everything shopping cart size and above, I think LiDAR is going to be a universal kind of adoption. But it's up to Ouster to make that an obvious choice through a combination of capability, certifications, affordability, and ease of software integration. Because right now it's getting pretty easy to integrate cameras and AI into a system. But the problem is, and it's affordable to do it, but the problem is that the performance is nowhere close to what a LiDAR can bring. And there's no safety certifications for camera AI systems. So there's still more work to be done. It's not a guarantee, but Ouster kind of has in control of a big part of the destiny in making LiDAR the easiest, most affordable, most capable option for perception out there.
If you look at capabilities, down the road for me is Mar-a-Lago. And you can see from the West Palm side of Mar-a-Lago, there's a dog, and I don't know the brand, so I don't want to speculate on the brand, but I could spot a LiDAR on it that goes back and forth along the lagoon, back and forth with LiDAR on it. That's interesting. So do you see smaller form factor sizes of robots such as the dog? Will those all have LiDARs? Obviously, the president has different security needs than about every individual in the world, but there's a LiDAR on there. Could we see kids' toys such as that having LiDARs on it in the future?
I think so. There's already LiDAR on Roombas, for instance, or whatever the no brand name Roomba equivalent. So there are really small robots that are cheap. You can buy for $500,000 that have simple LiDARs on them. I don't think that Ouster is going to be the company to build that kind of LiDAR. It doesn't really make sense for us to go into kind of consumer goods LiDAR. There's very few barriers to entry, lots of competitors out of Asia, and they've proven that that's a good market. Asia is great at making low cost, low performance things that are great for consumer applications. And I have no problem with that. For something like a robotic security dog that's moving along a perimeter in a big wide open space and has to do it day or night, rain or shine, that's a perfect use case for LiDAR. And it gets into those edge cases. Like, it's okay when your robotic vacuum gets stuck or bumps a table. It doesn't actually matter at all. But if your robotic dog walks off the dock into the ocean you've just lost, tens of thousands of dollars, and you no longer have that security, right? And so, and it only has to happen once a year for 1 second, one little misstep, one misjudgment in perception because it was too foggy, too snowy, too rainy, or too dark that day for you to be out that money and that security and have this huge headache. So again, LiDAR provides that guarantee that it never makes that mistake. And that's, yeah. So environments outdoors like that, perfect use case. I expect to see all manner of mobile robots in that form factor and in those environments using LiDAR in the future. And obviously, I mean, they're already using the LiDARs from Ouster on those robots today.
Yeah, and you don't want fight to go, oh, it just, you don't.
I remember back in the day, there was like a security robot that made the Twitter feed that had fallen into a fountain. It's like one of these mobile robots, and it had committed suicide by just rolling into a fountain and like short circuiting. And it was like, yeah, you can't have that happen. It's not a viable plan.
No, and then I'll let the audience in on a little secret. In the lagoon is a bull shark breeding ground. So things get more interesting right there. So we covered warehouse, we covered security. I'm really curious to get your perspective on autonomous vehicles and autonomous trucks. Obviously, they use LiDAR outside of one company, Tesla. Do you view both the autonomous vehicle and autonomous trucks industries as growth industries for Ouster?
Yeah, absolutely. Ouster, because we have this thesis around diversification of autonomy across all these verticals, people misinterpret that as not being interested in the autonomous vehicle market. And, couldn't be further from the truth. Like, that's a bread and butter industry for us. We, roughly generate 25% of our revenue from autonomous vehicles that operate on public streets in one way or another. We have really notable customers there. May Mobility, one of the last remaining US-based robotaxi companies. We have a major contract with Motional to supply the exclusive long-range LiDAR and the Motional robotaxi. So yeah, the autonomous vehicle space is incredibly important for us. And we make sure to build products that are relevant for that space. I hope to see it grow immensely in the coming years, but it's a really hard challenge. And so I know it's going to grow. The question is how fast and when will it really take off? And when will it have the Waymo moment for autonomous trucking that Waymo has had? And I'm not putting Ouster, I don't want to be in the position of having to make that bet. That's the kind of bet that all the other LiDAR companies in this space in the US have been forced to make, is, putting all their eggs in this like robotaxi autonomous vehicle market and waiting, like literally waiting for their customers to use the technology and deploy it at scale. And they have no control over that situation because LiDAR does not make an autonomous vehicle. LiDAR does not make an ADAS system. There's a lot of hard problems that lie above the LiDAR. So for me, Ouster is in a position where we have products that we can, that play in this space, and we're going to be there with the right products at the right time with a great set of capability and know-how and a commercial team to go serve those opportunities. When they, if they come in the next year, I hope so, but they may come in the next five years to decade. And so I don't want that to be taken as me not being enthusiastic about those use cases. I love the prospect of cars that drive themselves. I love riding Waymo. Autonomous semis make perfect sense once you can get them to work. Our roads should be safer. We should not have 40,000 people a year dying. And ADAS, driver assistance, can solve a lot of that. So whether it's autonomy or driver assistance, I want to see it all. And I hope that Ouster is a part of it. But from a business perspective, it's kind of a waiting game for companies to really, get over that hump and have the Waymo moment.
I give you credit. You have a diversified business. And I want to highlight an important fact. I have to credit this to the Washington Post editorial board. They did a wonderful editorial board about the casualties, or I'll use the term carnage, on our roads, the 40,000 individuals that perish every year. That's enough to fill up an entire baseball stadium. That is more individuals than Washington Nationals Park, almost double the size of Fenway. Then if you look at how many individuals that are seriously injured in a crash every year, It's more to fill up every Major League Baseball stadium. It's important because opening day is 7 weeks away.
Yeah, it's insane. And it's just because it happens in ones and twos that for some reason, human psychology is more okay with that. But it's imagine if 40,000 people a year were dying in airliners going down. I mean, it's just an unacceptable world, but it's also one it's very difficult. Like it's not like the auto industry hasn't been trying to solve it. There's huge amounts of safety technology that goes into cars, and they've made cars safer and safer and safer over the years. But there are also trends that have been, pushing back against that. Cell phone use, distracted driving has gone up. So we've seen auto deaths go up, even as the safety technology has improved the overall safety of the cars. So there's been immense effort. We've made progress, but it's still so far from being an acceptable world. And we're going to look back on this era once everything has true high quality ADAS, true high quality autonomy, and no one is dying, or essentially no one, single digit numbers of people are dying a year, which I do think is possible in the long term. We're going to look back on this era and be like, wow, how did we accept the lack of safety that you and I accept every day when we get in our cars, or that we accept when we walk around our streets? Because increasingly, it's the other road users that are getting hit that are the ones dying.
Distracted driving is an epidemic. I was crossing the road yesterday, two-lane road, one car each way. Car's going, and I start mouthing off. Oh, yeah, put in some four-letter words, trying to get this person's attention. Lo and behold, they go right by me. Everybody knows what they were doing. This individual was staring at the phone and gave me one of these. Like, you're on your phone. It's a 35 mile an hour speed limit. You're doing 55 going lane to lane to lane when it's one lane each way because you're distracted. The only way to truly stop that is autonomous driving. And that's why I'm really bullish on this technology. If you look at saving lives from autonomy, another incredible use case is defense and military applications. The amount of lives of these men and women it can save is pretty tremendous, especially when they go into harm's way and they go into theater or into conflict zones. Do you view defense as a growth industry for LiDAR? Are you currently doing anything in defense?
Yeah, I mean, defense is interesting because there's obvious benefits to autonomy and defense, whether it's what we've seen with drones in Ukraine and kind of the offensive side of defense, or the automation of the supply chains and logistics, which are, I think, the ratio in the military. There's, for every one frontline soldier, there's 10 people in logistics in the military in one way or another. And so, something like automating a convoy supply chain makes perfect sense. But that being said, the defense industry is very slow moving in the US. And there are some startups in the US that have spoken very vocally about this issue. And Anduril is an example of that, highlighting how slow moving defense contractors and the Pentagon are in adopting new technology, things like autonomy. And so that does apply to Ouster's business with defense. We do have some great customers in the defense industry doing everything from supply chain automation to kind of frontline systems automation. But I don't see it right now as a major growth driver for Ouster, partially because the rest of Ouster's business is growing so much more quickly. Things like robotics, industrial, and even in automotive are just growing at a much faster rate than what the defense industry is kind of capable of. But it's also because of some of these systemic issues with the way new technology is adopted in the military that are kind of holding back the technology. So clear use cases, but it's not going to be a major driver of Ouster's growth unless something changes that's largely out of Ouster's control. Since we're selling LiDAR, we're not selling autonomy systems. There are other companies that maybe have more control over the rate of adoption of the end systems with the Pentagon.
In the future, what market segment do you see the largest in terms of revenue being for Ouster?
I look to what kinds of, it comes back to unit volumes. Like in robotics, how many units are there? How many autonomous logistics vehicles, autonomous forklifts, how many tractors, how many diggers and steamrollers are there in the world? And there are hundreds of millions of those systems in the world, even today. And so if 90% of those are being automated, that's going to be an immense business. Actually, it will eclipse the automotive business. And the ASPs are generally, higher for for a lot of those applications than in automotive. Automotive LiDAR needs to be a couple $100 long term, but a forklift can support a higher cost because it's an enterprise customer. They understand the benefits, the savings they're getting. So overall revenue and unit count is actually bigger outside of automotive and these other mobile autonomy spaces. But then if you apply that same logic to the smart infrastructure use cases, traffic and technology, and security, and just ask like how many security cameras get sold every year? It's hundreds of millions to billions of cameras that get sold into those industries. And so the question then is, okay, there's probably not going to be 90% saturation of LiDAR sensors into the security industry. But with 10%, basically it could be equal to or rivaling all of these mobile applications if we can prove that it's more economical and more capable to use LiDAR than cameras, or to use it in combination. And so that's a big kind of part of our strategy right now is how good can we make these combined software hardware products, Gemini, Blue City, to convince our customers that they're getting the value that would make them adopt these things wide scale, as ubiquitously as possible alongside cameras or in lieu of cameras. So big markets, and I'm very bullish on smart infrastructure. And Blue City, I think, has already kind of proven that it's the best product in its class. And so I have I'm very bullish on the adoption of traffic technology, or Ouster's traffic technology in that domain.
I would summarize it this way. Ouster's a diversified business. Angus, what is the future of Ouster?
I think it's back to what we were talking about at the beginning. Ouster, long term, if we stick to this strategy and are successful with our solutions and our software, we'll be an autonomy company. We'll be selling, a large portion of the autonomy stack, both the hardware and the software and the embedded compute, to our customers. And that kind of company doesn't really exist. No, I would say that one of the closest corollaries is Mobileye. Mobileye is on path to being an autonomy company. They're an ADAS company today, but exclusively for the automotive industry. I want to be that kind of company, but for everything else.
Ouster wants to become the everything store for autonomy, to take the famous phrase for Amazon. Everything will be autonomous. The future is bright. The future is autonomous. The future is Ouster. Angus, thank you so much for coming on the road to autonomy today.
Thanks. This was great.